Well, welcome back to Awkward Christian Questions. This is our third episode. Can you believe it?
Oh, I'm so awkward.
Grace, we are cruising. That's not so much. I know most podcasts are like, okay, we just started this and we're at 300. But we've got to start, and we are going to be addressing a truly awkward question today. And I'm just going to jump right into it. I'm going to hang it out there like a piece of meat.
Okay.
Should Christians wear bikinis?
The fact that you used hang it out there like a piece of meat might not have been the best metaphor.
Probably not the best wording there. You're right. In retrospect, maybe we edit that out. Just keep it in there to show people how dumb I am. Yeah, should Christians wear bikinis? Okay, and I'm going to let you take the lead on this for obvious reasons, okay? But I want to start by saying this. I am personally vowing right now that I will never wear a bikini.
That's good.
Is that
That's
good?
Yeah. I don't know if anybody wants to see you in a bikini.
What? Really? Because no, the reason I'm saying that is because I know I have a good body and I don't want to tempt anyone. I don't want to cause anyone to stumble. So I am vowing right now that I will never wear a bikini.
Okay.
No, actually, what would be the male equivalent of a bikini? I guess it'd be the Speedo. And you know what? I'm going to vow I'll never wear one of those either. In fact, I think there's only one reason you should ever wear a Speedo, man.
You're European?
No, I'm not even giving the Europeans a pass on this. There's only one reason.
What is that?
If you are in the Olympics and you are competing as a swimmer.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm sorry, Europeans, you look ridiculous. It takes an American/Canadian to tell you, don't do it. Or maybe I'm just jealous that I don't really have the Speedo body, but I think it's more than that. Oh, okay. But of course, primarily, I don't think we're talking about Speedos or dudes. We're probably talking about women here, which makes it really weird and awkward for me to even like opine on. So I'm going to let you lead off. What do you think, Grace? Should Christians wear bikinis?
It's a great question. Modesty has been such an important issue in the church and something that seems like there's a lot of controversy surrounding. My personal take is that it depends on the context.
Oh, cop out. I love it.
But if you're with your family, if you're with your husband on a romantic vacation and it's the two of you and you want to wear a bikini, like, you do you.
Okay, I can see where this is going. Did you purchase one recently?
Do you want me to? No, but if you're going to like the church barbecue pool party,
Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a little bit of discretion in what you're wearing is advised. Okay. And I think that this is, become such a controversial issue because there's some teachings in the Bible about modesty, but a lot of times in the church, the issue of modesty has been kind of used as a tool to control women. And there's been some real shame them and basically blame male sexuality on like females showing too much of their body, which I don't find helpful. And so I think it's become, a hot button issue. And we're not the only religion that deals with these issues about modesty in women. Almost every religion has something to say about the way that women dress and act and how they behave in terms of modesty. So I think this is really like a universal issue and something that we probably do need to talk about, but we need to talk about it with some grace and some
sensitivity.
Yeah.
Given the fact that you're right, it has been used as a cudgel often to shame women, to blame them for male lust. Which I'll be talking about more at the end of this podcast.
We're still silly jokes.
No, the silly jokes too, but then there's a serious part right at the end, okay? I'm going to get to this. But yeah, I think it is, man, context, it's funny I said that was a cop-out to talk about context, but I do think that context is so important.
Yeah.
And not just context is like, okay, are you at what kind of function are you at? But even cultural context, right? Because it's hard to make like categorical rules for dress because different dress means different things in different cultures, in different times throughout history. I mean, even in the Bible, right? It says that women should wear head coverings, essentially. Right. Why don't we do that today? Of course, some people do, but the vast majority of Christians don't, because we understand that a head covering doesn't mean what it meant in the first century. In the first century, if you weren't wearing a head covering, it meant that, maybe you were kind of a promiscuous woman. Maybe you were kind of looking for something you shouldn't be. It doesn't mean that anymore when you don't have a head covering, right? It was so culturally specific. In fact, now if you have a head covering, it means maybe you're Muslim, maybe you're Amish, but it just doesn't have that same significance today, or if you don't have a head covering. And so it is really hard to make like hard and fast rules, like absolutely you cannot wear this article of clothing, you have to wear this article of clothing. And I think, but at the same time, of course, there has to be some guidance on modesty in Christian communities, right? If you show up to church in something that is just like scandalously revealing, now I think actually a good rule for this, if you're going to set guidelines, it should be the women who are instructing the women. I think that's just less
I'm going to tell you what, if
awkward.
someone shows up to church and they're scandalously clad, they are probably the women who need the
True.
love of Christ the
Amen.
most
Yep.
because they haven't been immersed in the culture. I mean, these things are somewhat cultural too.
Yes.
Like we
No, that's
learn
true.
how to behave from being raised in a particular culture. We learn what's appropriate and what isn't. And if someone comes into a church and they're wearing really revealing clothes, that tells me right off the bat that they are probably really in need of love.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and attention and maybe some healing. It's not something where I immediately think, oh, I need to address like a moral issue in what they're wearing. It's more like I see that and I think this is a person that's hurting.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I was thinking of someone who's like already part of the body of Christ. Maybe they even grew up in the church, but they're wearing something that's totally inappropriate for the context. But you're absolutely right. If someone comes in, I mean, that's the least of the issues. You know, they need to meet Jesus. They need to, hopefully, the way you dress and those other more minor things are going to get ironed out along the way, right? I also think that this is something that ideally, I know this doesn't always happen, should be addressed in a home. Like, you know, our daughters are still very young, but when they're teenagers and if they try to go out of the house wearing something that is way too revealing, either you or I are probably going to say something like, hey, put on some more clothes, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think some of this goes back to how women get power. And traditionally, women haven't had a lot of power, but one way to get power relationally was through our sexuality.
Sure.
And as a Christian woman, as you're kind of a mature Christian, you develop a different like place of power. It's one less about your sexuality and maybe more your role as like a mother of the church, a queen of your home and place, a pillar of the community. And you don't necessarily need that power that comes from your sexuality as much in order to hold place in society.
Yeah.
But when I see women that are very outwardly focused on sort of displaying their sexuality, I generally see those women as women who are lacking power in their life and they're trying to access it in a way that has been most traditionally accessible for women.
That's interesting.
So that's my perspective on the issue.
And then hopefully as you mature, you rely upon that less. And I think of the Bible verses at Proverbs where it's like, charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman of the Lord is to be praised, right? Yeah, beauty, your physical beauty, male and female, doesn't last forever, right? It's going to fade. And yet ultimately what matters is if you are a person of the Lord and if you are spiritually mature and if you're wise, those are the more enduring qualities.
Yeah, and yet at the same time, I mean, women are beautiful. And
I can attest to that. Yeah.
I think if you God made us this way, he made our bodies a certain way that attract men. And as long as it's placed in the right context, it can be healthy.
I think it's also worth mentioning that, as a lot of people have pointed out, the verses in the Bible about modesty may actually be talking more about not flaunting your wealth, right? Sometimes we read it as like, don't braid your hair and wear all this jewelry. And actually the Bible writers were talking about, hey, don't try to look wealthy and gaudy and flashy. And we read the word modesty and we think, oh, that means about not showing too much skin. So we got to be careful not to conflate those two things because they're entirely different. And it's actually more threatening in many ways because how many Christians struggle with trying to look good to other people in other ways, right? And so those verses apply to that as well. Oh, well, I don't know, honey. I don't think we landed on like a hard and fast yes or no on the bikini question.
Yeah, I don't have a hard or fast yes or no. It depends on context. One of my best friends is Muslim, and we were actually talking about this very issue the other day. And she wears a hijab, and she was talking about swimsuits, and she's purchased a very modest, like full length, full body swimsuit. And it just occurred to me that, if I were to ever be around her and her family in a context where we were at a lake or something, I would be more aware of what I was wearing because I wouldn't want to be a strange woman in that context.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so I think part of it has to do with, who you're around and what's normative in the context
Yeah.
in which they are living, and then trying to be appropriate within that context.
Yeah. So it calls for a lot of discernment, wisdom, sensitivity, which aren't bad things.
I will say the new swimsuits that are like the string up the butt ones, like honestly, probably nobody should be wearing that. Not so much for modesty, like cold. It doesn't do you favors, girls. It's probably not the best look.
That's a good word. Yeah. Not all swimsuits are, even bikinis are the same, right? Yeah. There are some that are pretty crazy. Anyway.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that and not me. That sounded really creepy coming from me. Okay, well, I'm eager to hear what our special guest is going to say. Going to help us go a little deeper on this. It's an important topic, but I want to dive into your favorite segment, right? Maybe not. The last thing you want to hear.
That's funny. Yeah.
You like this? Okay, well, we'll see. And we're going to stick to the theme of outfits and how you dress. So this is like the 7 last things you want to hear someone say about your outfit, about your dress. Okay, so here we go. Number one, the last thing you want to hear is, I wish I had the confidence to wear that. I mean, it sounds good, right? But it's actually kind of a...
That's like an underhanded compliment.
Kind of a left-handed compliment where you're going, you really are too bold there. That's too much. Okay, number 2. The second thing you do not want to hear someone say about your outfit is, I've been dressing you with my eyes all day.
Dressing you.
Do you get this?
Yeah, dressing you as opposed to undressing you.
Because someone might say, I've been undressing you with my eyes. But it's like you're not wearing enough and you don't have the body to pull it off probably. And they're like, I've been dressing you with my eyes.
Yeah. It means get some clothes on.
Maybe that wasn't good when you have to explain it. Okay, but number 3, it looks like you skinned a hotel couch.
Oh, that's familiar because you said that to me once.
Did I?
Yeah.
Hey, I was just speaking the truth in love, okay?
It was an outfit, a dress that I wore for church. It had this pattern on it. And I said, Drew, do you like my dress? Well, it kind of looks like you skinned a hotel couch. Thank you, honey.
You were beautiful, but the dress sucked, okay? I'm sorry. I'm just giving it to you straight. And you weren't pleased with that, as I recall. I was wondering where I must have dug into the recesses of my memory to get that.
There you go.
Okay, number 4, last thing you want to hear about your outfit is you have a sort of John the Baptist style. Do you remember what John the Baptist wore?
Yeah.
I think it's like camel hair.
Yeah.
8 locusts, kind of a crazy man. Not a compliment, okay?
He was a hippie before the hippies.
That's true.
Yeah.
Kind of a grunge thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, number 5. The last thing you want to hear about your outfit is, I love shopping at Goodwill too.
But I do.
I know you do. And maybe that's not an insult because you can get some awesome deals there on cool clothes, okay? But if someone just assumes that your outfit is from a secondhand store, probably not a compliment. Okay, number 6. The 90s called, they want their clothes back.
It's pretty much everything in my closet.
Actually, I take this back. This is a massive compliment because those were my glory days.
Golden era, yeah.
Those were my glory. Yeah, yours were more like the late 90s, maybe early 2000s. I was 12 when the 90s started, okay? So just wait, is that true? Yeah, 12 when the 90s started. So this is my era. And everything from the 90s still looks good to me, except for the frosted tips. Okay, the last thing you do not want to hear about your outfit is this. Hey, my grandma wore that same dress.
Some grandma's got good style.
That's true. Unless grandma's got awesome style and it's a throwback vintage sort of thing.
Grandma's got some money too. She might have some good clothes.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, maybe that one doesn't work either. But this is really exciting to me. Again, man, 3 for 3. We got another sponsor for this podcast, and I'm super excited here. Willing to do the ad read. Yes, absolutely. And it's appropriate. It's perfect given the topic, okay? This episode is brought to you by Modest Christian Swimwear. We sell the kind of swimsuits that make your grandmother proud and make the boys say, hey, I wonder what's under there. Because they'll literally have no idea. These full coverage suits are made from genuine horse blankets, so they're a little bit itchy. But it's worth it because we believe that skin isn't in and that modest is hottest. Look for our latest line of swimsuits at your local homeschool co-op. Or visit modestchristianswimwear.com and enter the code COVERME.
That's honestly probably a website.
I didn't even check. I didn't even check.
Like, I bet you that exists.
I didn't even check, but yeah, type it in at your own risk,
Cover me.
folks. Yes, that's the code word, cover me. And I just thought, I was thinking of what I'm going to get you, Grace, for Christmas.
Gee, thanks.
We got you covered.
Modest is hottest, girls.
Modest is hottest. Okay, well, I am thrilled to have Tanner K. Swanson with us. Tanner, well, first of all, let me say Tanner is a editor and writer for Desiring God, which is an awesome, very prominent ministry. And I ran into some of her writing online, and she's just written very insightfully and biblically, most importantly, about this topic of modesty. And so I appreciate you taking some time to chat with me. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Awesome. Let's jump right into it. Okay, so, Grace and I discussed this somewhat silly question of, should Christians wear bikinis? And what I'd like to do, though, here is just go a little deeper behind the question, underneath the question. And I guess the first question I have for you is, why is modesty even important in the first place?
Yeah, great question. And I'll start with a definition before getting to the
That's
importance of
good.
modesty. Yes, yeah. So modesty is a disposition of the heart that prefers God's glory to my glory, heaven's eyes to earth's eyes, and God's esteem to man's esteem. And then that heart preference flows into specific day-to-day material choices. I get this mostly from 1 Peter 3:3-4, which says this: "Do not let your adorning be external, the braiding of hair and the putting on of gold jewelry, or the clothing you wear, but let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart, with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious." So true modesty is rooted in the heart, the spirit, internal realities that only grace and faith could conspire to create. Then and only then can we not let our adorning be external. We tend to focus on modesty as purely a material principle, but in reality, it's an internal one that then flows into material choices that reflects spiritual realities that's already alive inside of us. There's one author that says this of modesty, and I love it. She says, "The external signs of what we call modest behavior, not bragging, not showing off your body too much, are ultimately signifiers of modesty, not modesty itself." So with that in mind, you can ask, why is modesty important? Well, the answer seems pretty clear. Modesty matters because our hearts matter. And our hearts will speak not only through what our mouths say, they speak also through our clothing, our hairstyles, the amount of money we spent. And God desires for those hearts to say, both with our words and our lives, "I am not my own. I was bought with a price. Therefore, I strive by grace through faith to honor God with my whole life, including my appearance, including my wallet." The list goes on. And that's obviously a paraphrase of 1 Corinthians 6:19-20. So if we have modest hearts, then we're going to make day-to-day material decisions that are going to differ from the world's. Christians know that God calls us to a heart-level holiness that can't but manifest itself in the way we live publicly. And so I just think it's really important to get to the definition of modesty as a heart matter, because then you can really get to modesty as material matter. So heart matter that flows into a material matter.
Oh, I love that. That is so good.
Yeah.
You're right, because so much of the discussion about this topic is on the surface. And it's like, well, who cares if you wear this rather than that? But I love what you said about this is really a heart issue. And it's going to have manifestations in what we wear and how we conduct ourselves. And speaking of those, what are some good questions in your view that people can ask themselves when it comes to the practical decisions of like, okay, how do I present myself to the outside world? What should I wear? What are some good questions to ask?
Yeah, well, I think maybe the question we're tempted to ask the most is just, would it be wrong if I wore this? We hold up something at the store to a friend and say, is this too short or is this too tight? And while maybe it's most natural to ask that question, it can be a little bit immature as Christians, because the Bible doesn't have a list of modesty do's and don'ts. It commands modest dress, but it doesn't say yay or nay on every single outfit that we go to wear. So it can be hard when we ask that question. We're going to not get much of a response from the scriptures. But even though the Bible is quiet on wardrobe particulars, it's really loud on wisdom principles. And there's
Hmm.
one from Paul in First Corinthians, specifically chapters 6 and 10, that has really helped me. And I'll just get a little bit into the backstory of that issue that Paul's addressing here so that we can really understand it. So throughout First Corinthians, the church at Corinth is really struggling with food. They want to know in the new covenant what kinds of foods they can eat and what kinds of foods they can't eat. Sounds pretty familiar to us as Christians trying to decide what to wear. What can I wear? What can't I wear? Well, Paul responds to them in several places by saying this. First, he says, all things are lawful. And that's 1 Corinthians 6:12 and 10:23. So he says, in other words, no food is unclean because in the new covenant, it's not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth. This
Hmm.
defiles a person. That's Jesus in Matthew 15:11. And so what can they eat? In theory, the Corinthians can eat anything. But even so, that's not the end of his response. He declares all foods clean, and then he adds, but not all things are helpful.
Hmm.
All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. And I think we really need to hear that in the modesty conversation today. Eating this or that food isn't inherently sinful, but that doesn't make it helpful. And the same thing can be said of our clothing. Just because something isn't wrong doesn't mean it's automatically good. So God's word outlaws no outfits, but that doesn't mean every outfit helps, benefits, profits, serves, encourages ourselves and others. So while the question, is it wrong, tends to flounder around, we can anchor ourselves by asking a question that we can actually answer. Is it helpful?
Hmm. That is so good. I've never thought of applying Paul's wisdom for the Corinthians about the food conversation to something like this, but I think it's an apt comparison because we tend to think of things just black and white. Okay, we want a legalistic standard. What can't I
Yeah.
wear? What can I wear? Same with the Corinthians, like what can I eat? What can't I eat? And yeah, that's where discernment and God's wisdom is so important. So yeah, thanks for drawing that out. I love your
Yeah.
responses too. They're so steeped in scripture. This is crucial because I feel like if we don't go to scripture, if we don't rely on God's wisdom when it comes to this topic, we're just kind of stuck at the level of like culture war conversations about
Yeah.
modesty and accusations that fly back and forth. So that's super helpful. I think you alluded to this a little bit
Absolutely.
already, but some people have pointed out that some of the biblical passages about modesty may actually have been talking about not flaunting wealth. Um,
Right.
or being like showy, right?
Hmm.
Whereas when we think of modesty, I think we tend to think of just like, okay, are we showing too much skin? Uh,
Right.
what's your response to that? Do you think that the Bible has both in mind or primarily one?
Yeah, I think both is probably a proper response. Again, because modesty comes back to that internal reality of the heart and the spirit. And a gentle and quiet spirit isn't only going to be manifested in the way that we dress, it's also going to be manifested in the way we talk and the way we
Mm,
spend, the way we shop, the people we befriend. I think it's going to have implications that reach way beyond just the way that we dress. And you see that in scripture. Um, in that First Peter passage that I read, you can interpret the different aspects that Paul points out, whether it's the braiding of hair, the putting on of gold jewelry. You could look at that just as on the level of this is talking about physical adornments, clothing. But putting on of gold jewelry is also a signifier of wealth.
yeah,
And the braiding of hair also could be seen as a status symbol. I have time to braid my hair. I'm not toiling as much as others. I'm not going to get dirty. So I think you can read it on both levels. And I think that would be right.
interesting. Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting because that wouldn't even have occurred to me that, yeah, the braiding of hair can be a sign of status. Like you said, especially in the ancient world, first century, we think now, well, if you're braiding your hair, it's just a fashion choice
Right.
because we all have enough. Most of us have enough time to do something like that. It wouldn't be some sort of
Mhm.
status symbol. And again, I think to your point about taking these principles, because the scripture isn't going to give us like the specific guidance on like, okay, don't wear a halter top, don't wear a mini skirt. I mean, but taking the principles and applying them faithfully in our context because
Mhm.
things have changed so much, obviously, since the first century. I think this even goes to the whole topic of head coverings, which I know is controversial. But in the ancient world, if a woman wasn't wearing a head covering, it meant something like, okay, maybe she's the kind of woman who's looking for something that she shouldn't be. Whereas
Right.
today, that doesn't signify the same thing anymore. And so we
Yeah.
really have to kind of dig into the principles and the wisdom of Scripture and apply them faithfully in our context. And I think the other error that people make is just to say, well, the ancient world was so different, and these things are kind of outdated and just culturally irrelevant because their culture was so different from ours. But like you've pointed out, it does have a lot to say about our conduct and how we dress. When it comes to like modesty, as in, you know, don't show too much, but also don't be braggadocious. Don't
Yeah.
flaunt yourself. And that's something that I think equally applies to men, right? Because let's face it, when it comes to this conversation, usually I'm not thinking when I put on clothes in the morning, like, Drew, am I showing too much skin? No one wants to see that. So it's a little bit different for guys and girls. Let's just be honest. But there are ways in which men can be immodest. Whether it's trying to show off their muscles or trying to kind of show maybe how wealthy they are or how much cred they have in other ways. So I think this is something that applies to us all.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any last things I just wanted to, have a short conversation with you, and this has been so good. I feel like we've gotten a lot of wisdom in Bible in a short amount of time. Is there anything else you'd like to say, especially to women, on this topic? Because I think a lot of Christian women are a little cautious on this topic, understandably, because maybe it's been used as a cudgel to kind of beat them up or make them feel like they are the problem when it comes to men's lust,
Yeah.
and so maybe they've dispensed with the idea of modesty altogether, thinking it's just a sort of a legalistic sort of thing. What would you say to a Christian woman about this topic?
Yeah, I think I would tell her that maybe for a long time, the conversations that we've been having are mostly about immodesty, and that
Mm,
if we transition back to a real discussion of that heart posture that I talk about, then it won't feel like quite as burdensome of a topic. I'll see a lot of times a podcast episode that will have the word modesty in the title from a Christian author or speaker. And as I'll listen, I often find myself thinking, wow, this is a lot of discussion just about specific manifestations of immodesty today. And I just wonder if that transition from really discussing the internal reality of modesty and what God says about it has transitioned into only talking really about immodest specifics. And that does feel burdensome and can
hmm.
feel hard to discern legalism from not. And so I would just say, let's try, as we're talking about modesty, to really talk about modesty and not just try to, like you said, bludgeon each other on the head with examples of immodesty. And so
Mm,
I don't mean to say that Christians should never talk specifics or give examples, because we see in the passage I quoted, 1 Peter 3, Peter has specifics. He talks about the braiding of hair, he talks about clothing, but he uses those specifics to get them back to God. And I think that's what sometimes we lack in the conversation these days with modesty, is when we talk specifics, let's bring them to Godspeed. And
oh, yeah.
let's make him really big and us properly small, so that way we want more of him instead of just more of specific types of clothing or not clothing.
Mm,
Because I think those decisions will come, but they have to come under the sight of him. They have to come from his esteem and his glory over man's esteem and my glory. So I would just encourage women to, when we think we're talking about modesty and we're really just talking about immodest particulars, let's recognize that we're doing that and go back to understanding what modesty is biblically. It's a heart posture that thinks God is big and I am small and responds appropriately in the way that we live. And then modesty will feel really beautiful instead of just oppressive.
oh, that's good. I love that. And keeping God at the center of it. That's so often what's missing. I can't
Yeah.
count how many conversations I've seen, especially online, about modesty and God's kind of absent from the conversation.
Right.
And it's all about particulars. And like you said, not that it's bad to talk about particulars, but we have to get the order right. It's about God.
Right.
It's about our hearts. And then it's about the specifics of how that plays out. I love that. Tanner,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I think you provided a lot of depth and wisdom on this topic. And for anyone who's listening to this and they want to read more of what Tanner has written, she's written some great articles at Desiring God. And I don't have like the URL right here, but if you just go and you search for your name or even Modesty, you'll see the article that I read that was so excellent on this topic that made me reach out to you. So thank you again for lending your time and your wisdom and being on a podcast called Awkward Christian Questions. That's a little awkward and weird. We appreciate you being on, and if you were up for it, we'll have you back on in the future.
That would be great. Thanks so much.
All right, and now we're going to shift gears here, a little more serious, for what we call the final word to send you off. Okay, well, this is going to take me back a bit because I remember when I was a teenager going on a youth group trip, and we went to a lake for the weekend, and there was a lot of swimming and hiking and eating and silly games. And I remember a couple of the girls wore 2-piece bathing suits. And honestly, I would never remember that, except for the fact that our youth leader gave a devotional one night where he launched into this sort of really tactless confrontation, calling out the girls who wore inappropriate swimsuits. And then he used that to set up a lesson for the boys on lust, in which he laid on the shame pretty thick and implied that the girls who dress inappropriately are responsible for the struggles that boys have.
I hate that.
It was awful. And especially looking back, I can see that his little talk was completely inappropriate. But it was also revealing, a lot more revealing than a 2-piece bathing suit. Because here's the thing, I'm guessing that there was some projection going on.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet he had a lust problem, and he blamed women and girls for the way that they dressed for causing his problem. I had a professor years ago who had a great expression. And Grace, you've heard me say this, but he'd say, it's better to wear slippers than to carpet the world.
I love that one.
Isn't that good? It means basically it's wiser and easier to change your own life than trying to change everything around you. And nowhere is this truer, I think, than when it comes to lust. So rather than trying to get everyone to dress or behave a certain way, you need to deal with your own heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, after all, where Jesus focused, right? He says, for out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander. Or when I think of when Jesus said, if your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and throw it away, which was hyperbole, yes. But he's saying, deal with yourself. Don't try to go changing everyone else. Change yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when it comes to this topic of lust, maybe if we focus more on our own hearts and our own habits, we would be less worried about trying to police how other people dressed. That's the final word. Thank you for joining us again. If you enjoyed this conversation, or even if you didn't, please leave us a rating. Actually, if you didn't, don't leave us a rating. Or a review on Apple or Google Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. But thank you for listening. And until next time, stay awkward.
Thank you, folks.